shortly. A warm welcome to all our panelists and speakers who've made it on a very busy day. It's the first day of the second week. I'd just like to introduce myself. My name is Rohini Kohli. I work on national adaptation plans supporting 50 countries on their efforts to try and elaborate their adaptation priorities and to identify a way to unpack these adaptation priorities into implementable climate actions. We are streaming this event because we have a global audience of lots of countries working on national adaptation plans, and particularly the project managers in countries that are developing these adaptation plans. Today's event is on a very important topic. It's on the issue of water resources and mainstreaming water resources in national adaptation plans, which means that the priorities around water, which are in the nationally determined contributions or in the national adaptation plans, have to be reviewed and elaborated into ideas which can crowd in partners and become much more investable, so that there is a bigger scaled up climate adaptation response in the water sector. And we actually want to really highlight this sectoral issue, because there is not necessarily an item on water resources in the discussions around NAPs or in the Paris Agreement, and we want to make sure that this topic is really taken up more and more in the context of countries' NDCs and NAPs. As we know, and today we have panelists from the African Arab state region, and we also know that in these regions there's a huge majority of NAPs and NDCs which are prioritizing adaptation. And also we know that the majority of climate change related disasters are water related. So that's, I think so it's actually a no-brainer to discuss this topic and to really highlight this topic in the context of the discussion around adaptation at this COP and also at future COPs. We know in Africa, because we are looking at these two regions in today's event, we know that in Africa, with its very diverse and vital life-supporting ecosystems, is particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. There's been 5 consecutive drought years in the Horn of Africa, a huge number of people in need of humanitarian assistance. And there's also been displacement of people, internal displacement, and also refugees fleeing countries in this region because of the acute water stress that is being experienced. There's been not only human impacts, but also impacts on livestock in these countries, which is a devastating loss of income and livelihood opportunities. In the Arab states region, which is home to an estimated 470 million people, yet it has only 2% of the world's renewable water resources, and it's one of the world's driest regions, and it's home to 12 of the world's most water-scarce countries. Just like in Africa, also in the Arab region, an ongoing drought has caused several years of below expected levels of rainfall, which has been gripping countries like Iraq and Syria. As a result of climate change, drought in the Tigris-Euphrates basin has gone from a once in 250-year event to a 1 in 10-year event. We do have very shocking numbers. I will not go into the details, but these numbers which have been released by Iraq, the Ministry of Water Resources, has shown that water availability has halved due to the drought. And also that there are really shocking changes in the areas known for centuries as the Fertile Crescent. And these reductions in water availability are having knock-on effects in terms of nutrition, hunger, displacement, and livelihoods. So the nexus between water, agriculture, health, and livelihoods cannot be overstated. And that is why every country, I think in the region, in Africa, it's almost all except one have included adaptation in their NDCs. And the Middle East and North Africa, we have 18 countries that have included water as an adaptation priorities. And just to step back on the NAPs, there are about 51 countries that have submitted their national adaptation plans. 43 are mentioning water as a sector priority, given water's role as a climate connector for health, agriculture, livelihoods, and urban resilience. So in practice, all the national adaptation plans are prioritizing adaptation investments, but it's really vital that we accelerate these actions based on these plans and commitments. By accelerating adaptation action in water, we not only take an important step towards adapting to climate change, but we can also harness the potential of water as a catalyst. So I think if we can truly achieve this, then adaptation in water resilience truly can become a pathway to sustainable development. And we are very lucky to be joined by very distinguished panelists who are going to give us a flavor of how the countries are working towards tackling the very pressing issue of adaptation water resources. And we really do hope that in the global stocktake, in the discussions around the GGA, in the NAP-related discussions which are happening at this COP, that the issue of water resources is really, really taken up very, very seriously by the parties because it is the connector across many, many different topics. So with that, I'm actually going to request, and I just wanted to also mention to the panelists, we do have a global audience. Lots of countries working on NAPs are really eager to hear and exchange with each other on how this issue is being taken up by different countries. So, you know, this event is important for us, not just at the COP, but for the audience waiting back home that is really interested in knowing how the COP is taking up these issues. So with that, I'm going to ask my colleague Ben to introduce the panelists and take us through a round of questions. And then we'll take it from there. And to also let all the panelists know that we're very interested in future engagement. It is not only about this panel, it's actually about making sure we connect with you as we go along, because this, the issue of water is not going away. It's going to need much more work. So with that, over to you, Ben.
Thank you so much, Rohini. Brilliant. And thank you for setting the scene and highlighting the importance of water, both in terms of national adaptation plans, but also for the NDCs. I'm extremely honored to have you all here in the panel, highlighting the importance of water specifically. As Rohini said, we see that some of the countries represented here have one of the most water scarce regions within them, and are tackling with multiple development issues as well, but absolutely one of the pioneers when it comes to water resource management and highlighting the importance of it in the climate strategies. I would first like to present Mr. Thomas Laretin, who is the Deputy Director for Climate Change Adaptation at the Climate Change Directorate, Ministry of Environment from Kenya. Thank you so much for being here, and I know that you are extremely important and a key speaker when it comes to different negotiations with NDCs and NAPs as well. Very much appreciated. And then we have Engineer Ahmed Mohammed Hassan, who is the Director of Hydrometeorological Department at the Ministry of Energy and Water Resources. Also an instrumental part when it comes to NDCs and NAPs, and especially looking into water resource management. And then we also have Dr. Saddam, who is the Chief Engineer at the Iraqi Ministry of Water Resources, and a water expert with over 5 years of experience with water-related issues in Iraq. I'm gonna just highlight the objectives of this entire panel, because it is important to work both across countries, but absolutely across regions as well. So we wanted to have this panel in order to create a platform to share knowledge, best practices, but also lessons learned, and raise awareness in terms of water and national adaptation plans, but also how they link to the NDCs for development. So with that, I'm gonna start with the first question to Mr. Thomas, who's representing Kenya. And as one of the first countries to finalize and submit the NAP, and as the country is battling with multiple challenges, including water scarcity, what are the stepping stones captured in the NAP to build water resilience, and what can be done to achieve this in a broader scale as well?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for our audience who are watching us wherever they are around the world. My name's again Laurentine Thomas Lelequitian. I'm a Deputy Director, Climate Change Directorate, Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry from Kenya. Sorry. And it's really my pleasure to be among the panelists. I really appreciate the privilege, and I'm happy to share our experiences as a country on the NAPs, because we are one of the first countries to submit our NAPs in 2017. And from then up to now, we have had very rich experience in terms of moving from formulation and implementation to actually making even very strong attempt in terms of monitoring, evaluation, and learning. So we submitted our NAP in 2017, and Kenya is in East Africa, is highly vulnerable to climate change, and specifically on issues of water is that over about 85% of the country is arid and semi-arid, and generally the country is a water scarce country, and all this is exacerbated by frequent droughts and floods that hit the country so often, and really impacts the livelihoods and the economy of the country. So in terms of that, I just want to give you a very recent example, is that in 2023 alone, we moved from extreme drought to extreme floods in just 1 year. And this shows how climate change is making these impacts more frequent and more intense. Up to around March, we had the worst drought in 40 years that affected not only Kenya, but the Horn of Africa. And as we speak now, the country is going through very bad floods due to El Nino phenomena. So already that gives you a signal of how vulnerable we are. And our NAP is from 2015 to 2030, so it's a long-term document. And also it's well synchronized with the NDC, which also goes up to 2030. And water is one of the sectors among the 20 sectors that we captured in the NAP, because we appreciate that climate change affects all our sectors. So our NAP covers all the economic sectors in the country. And in the NAP, we identified long-term, medium-term, and short-term priority actions to address all of them. And for water, we clearly identified the long-term, short-term, and medium-term priority actions, how to build resilience to the water sector. And just to mention how we are implementing it, is that we have a 5-year national document called National Climate Change Action Plan. And we pull the priority actions from the NAP and see which actions we can implement in 5 years. Because as I said, our NAP goes up to 2030. And in the priority actions for 5 years, we identify clear targets and indicators that will also help us to track our progress in terms of how we are meeting those priority actions. So currently we are in the third iteration of our National Climate Change Action Plan that will go up to 2027. The first one was from 2023, 2013, 2017, second from 2018, 2022, and now we are in the third cycle. And we have seen progress over time in terms of how we are continuously improving our adaptation and resilience across all the sectors. And from there, of course, we are getting good lessons. We are not saying we are doing it perfectly well, because as much as you plan well and put everything ready for implementation, you always need resources to do that, and those resources are not adequate. So that really limits our implementation of the NAPs. And in terms of how we monitor the progress of the NAPs, as I said, we are using the 5-year planning tool, which is the National Climate Change Action Plan, where we really try to put very clear measurable targets into that. And then now we are now developing our National Climate Change Action Plan implementation status reports. Like for the action plan that just ended, we were able to do 2 reports that we go back to the sectors, if it was water, that identified that they want to do like 12 multipurpose dams, one for storing water to make sure that we have water during the dry season. Secondly, for agriculture to produce food, and also to improve access to water. And also these dams help in regulating, controlling and managing floods. So we are able to go back to the water sector who actually provided these targets, and we tell them, you said you're going to do 1, 2, 3 on water. How far have you done? And what are the challenges and all that? And that's we do that periodically to track progress of implementation of the National Climate Change Action Plan. So, of course, you can't say we're already there. You know, M&E of adaptation is a gray area globally. It's an area that is not yet, well done. We still don't have common metrics, common methodologies, and common indicators globally. And we have the challenges of the baseline and data, especially for developing countries. But that notwithstanding, as a country, we started to take those baby steps in terms of tracking the implementation of the NAP through the action plan. And we are seeing gradually addressing some of these challenges, because some sectors are already building the baselines that we never used to have. And going forward we are seeing that we are going to improve. Even as we wait for this discussion currently happening on the global goal and adaptation, where we are going to identify global targets and global indicators that will help us to actually know what's the progress of adaptation and resilience building globally. And of course, we are following that very keenly, and we really look forward to having that global goal and adaptation framework out of this COP. So maybe I can stop there for now. Thank you.
No, that was absolutely brilliant, and you managed to highlight all the important areas of basically why it's important to work with NAP and looking into different M&E indicators as well. So congratulations to you and the entire team for doing that. And something that you mentioned was the importance of looking into climate-induced disasters such as floods and droughts as well, and integrating them into the different climate strategies. And I wanted to turn to Engineer Ahmed, and I know that Somalia is battling with multiple challenges. However, Somalia has managed to have one of the strongest NDCs in the Arab states, I would say, focusing a lot on water resource management and adaptation, as well as having a very strong NAP. I wanted to ask you how you managed to bridge the two different climate strategies and make it effective in the response as well.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. And I appreciate for the organizing for such event, which actually is a critical, specifically where we come from, our region, not only Somalia, but also our Eastern Africa, which currently facing on the extremely, events on the flood, especially on the most of the part of the southern Somalia. Generally, the climate extreme variabilities happening to Somalia and also our region, 80% relate to the water resource or hydrology. For example, in Somalia, if we are not drought, we are in flood. So if we are not flood, we are in drought. We are between two extremely. And what are the driving for this climate variability, which is very vulnerable in our Eastern Africa? Most of the thing is actually, it's an imbalance between our adaptation investment programs for climate adaptations and also the climate variability. For example, in Somalia specifically, we have 30 years investment gap, specifically on water resource. Let's start from 1950 up to 1990, we invested on the water resource in Somalia, more than any other sectors. We have been actually adapted on the integrated water resource management in almost in 1970s. We have been established basin authorities almost the early 1960s. We have been established one of our rivers on the ministry, which we call Ministry of Juba, which was actually specifically ministry concerned on the only one river, which was the first African country who have been specifically elected to the basin, one basin into the ministry. Then after 1990, we have been actually collapsing all the existing infrastructure. Then Somalia has become very vulnerable for climate variabilities. Whatever flood happening, actually it's vulnerable to our local communities. So basically, from the last 5 years, water resource Somalia has become a political agenda. Our country is not only so for the lack of investment gap, but also 30 years for the experiences on the climate variability. So our communities has become, a very adaptable to the climate variabilities, particularly to the local communities. Specifically, I can take you an example on some of the communities who are living across the border in Ethiopia, the town called Bradweyne, which always happen to the frequently for the climate variability. People are becoming more resilient. They understanding for the hydrological extreme variability happening to that region. So they know when it comes to the flood, so they know how to evacuate without actually getting information or early warning, So they know the mechanism actually to evacuate. So the community are become more resilient in Somalia. So basically in Somalia, we come up very comprehensive water sector development plan, which we call our National Water Resource Strategic Plan. Then our strategy, we have been identified on the key flagship programs that shapes in the next 30 years our future water sector development programs. So water sector, we have been actually making integrated to all sectors. So water is not only for Ministry of Water, it's for everybody. It's for agriculture, it's for livestock, it's for fishery, it's for economy, it's for other sectors. So we make water is actually a political agenda in Somalia, which actually highly, motivated from our top level, political level. After that, we align it, our national water strategy and also to the national adaptation program. Because we believe adaptation to the Eastern Africa is the water. If you want to adapt it to the climate change, you need to invest in your water resource. You need to invest in your water resource infrastructure. So in Somalia context, we believe adaptation, climate adaptation is you should actually invest in your water use management, whether sustainable water infrastructure, whether sustainable water conservation, whether sustainability for the groundwater development, whether sustainability of the efficiency irrigation water utilization is, whether sustainability for the urban water resilience program is. So water is actually our adaptation program. So we aligned our national water strategy, roadmap implementation to the national adaptation program. NDC and alignment with our national adaptation. Now we're finalizing the NDC. In early this week, we have been launched in here, COP28. We have been identified for our NDC implementation plan for 3 key priority programs, which we already actually developed for the financing. So the 3 key priority for our NDC, one is the water, sustainable water resource infrastructure, particular to the flood-prone area. The second flagship for our NDC implementation plan is a renewable energy, especially for the actually moving from the more actually investment for our renewable energy. The third also is a food security, food system, our country. So these are the 3 critical importances on the NDC implementation plan. So water is a top priority, which also actually is the largest finance requires. So we have a very clear plan on our water sector development, very clear alignment with our national adaptation program. And the other thing also, water is a long-term investment. It's not something that you can think about ad hoc based projects. It's not something that you can think about the short-term program priorities. When you think in water, you should have to think in the next 50 to 100 years. So recently we developed what we call hydroclimatic modeling in our basin, which actually we projected the variability happening to our water availability, precipitation, flood, soil moisture, land use in the next 100 years. We are launching today evening at Somali Pavilion, so you are invited, you can join us. That actually hydroclimatic modeling, it's showing us, it also shows the whole Eastern Africa basin, there will be more rainfall in our Eastern Africa in the next 100 years. Especially starting for our half of the century, and then in 2050. More actually precipitation will be coming to the Eastern Africa because we are same climate zone. So that means there will be more stream flow, there will be more flood. So our priority now, it's based on the evidence-based empirical analysis. So we want to actually to invest our water supply, our sustainable water infrastructure, flood risk management, based on the empirical analysis and hydroclimatic modeling actually that we have been projected. So that's also our plan for the next 100 years, where we want actually to invest in more sustainable water infrastructure. Lastly, I just want to mention about when we were coming here to the COP, we have been prioritized for the 3 key areas for the Somalia water agenda linked to the adaptation program. One actually is, Somalia and Eastern Africa, same also Kenya, Ethiopia. We have been faced for the 2020, 2021, 5 consecutive missing rainfall. I don't call missing, actually, we did not get actually the rate that we were expecting. So sometimes we are actually miscorrecting the language. We call fail rain season. Rain doesn't fail for scientifically, but actually it has not been the rain that we were expected for that actually season. So 5 consecutive rain has not been actually receiving the rain from the Eastern Africa for 2020-22. Then we realized that there is a lot of actually fluctuation for our groundwater availability, starting especially in the boreholes from 100 to 300 meter depth. Now we have done for deep groundwater assessment in our country, especially from 400 to 800 meter depth. We call actually Somalia Deep Groundwater Feasibility Study, where we cooperate with the Norwegian government. We understand Somalia is a very potential for deep groundwater resource, especially for between the depth 400 to 800 meter depth. Now our future programming to the groundwater development, we are very much focused on the investment on the deep groundwater resource in Somalia, because Somalia is below sea level. So there is actually millions of years water that has been actually coming from the Ethiopian highland, goes to the Somalia Indian Ocean. So Somalia is actually very potential for the deep groundwater resource in our country. Some of the aquifer storage capacity is actually can serve almost 75 million population. And actually it's not worried about for the safe field. It's something actually sustainable groundwater recharge, because the water actually is connected to the, to the upper catchment. The second, our priority we identified on the Somali population now living to the urban area is almost 54% of population live in urban area. So we are facing a lot of water stress town. Then we come up with a 30, one of 30 most water stress towns for the investment needs. Then the fourth priority is the one actually I'm talking about for the river basin that actually we come up, we develop it for hydroclimatic modeling, and now we are actually working for the investment. So water has a clear agenda, has a clear direction, and also has a clear link to our national adaptation program. So I just want to stop here.
No, thank you so much, Engineer Ahmed. That was also a brilliant intervention, and thank you for highlighting the importance of working cross-sectoral, so to say, and highlighting the integration. I wanted to move over to Dr. Saddam. I know that Iraq recently, or in 2021, launched their first NDC ever, where it highlighted the importance of water, climate security, climate resilience, climate adaptation. So it was definitely a cross-sectoral NDC, so to say. I wanted to ask how Iraq is working with this, both at a partnership level, but in terms of making it collaborative in order to unlock synergies and not reinvent the wheel, both within the country but also outside.
Thanks, Ben. Once again, this is Saddam Wahid. I have been working in Iraqi Ministry of Water Resources for around 15 years, and I have a PhD in hydrology and climatology. And going back to your question, I just want to highlight the introduction that has been announced. It's been said that Iraq is facing a reduction in water around 50%, and I can tell that maybe the situation is even worse. We have been facing the drought period for 3 to 4 years, which this thing is abnormal, that we haven't been seeing this situation for a long time since we have starting the recording of the water incoming to the Iraq. So historically, let's go back. I mean, for Euphrates and Tigris, the challenges that we have facing in terms of managing the water resources in Iraq, we have two rivers. I think most of the people here know that. It's Euphrates and Tigris with its tributaries. Historically, no dams has been implemented in upstream countries. So the system of Iraq has been built against the flood. So the system in Iraq is the priority is to protect from the flood. But when the implementation started in the upstream countries, they started building dams on both basins. The water has been coming to Iraq has been reduced significantly. With adding the climate change impact, the reduction percent can reach 50% or even less. So starting from this point, we have started working on our national determined document, the NDC. So it's been said that we have been completed that one in 2021, and our priority in the NDC in terms of the water resources is to adapt the water allocation. And our priorities for the water allocation is the first priority is for the drinking water for people. That's our highest priority. Then for the industrial and for other sectors related to the industrial, then we go to the third level, which is the agriculture sector. Then the marshland. So the most important actions that we are working on is to make sure that the water saving in the system is sufficient for drinking water. And as with that one also, people know that our economy depends on the oil production. So we want to make sure that we need enough water for the oil production, because each gallon of water oil we abstract, we need to inject 1.5. So we need to make sure this amount is allocated otherwise our economy will be impacted. And then also 80% or more or less of this percentage is allocation for the agriculture sector. And I will go back to the agriculture sector, but I just want to mention other part, which is the marshland. Our goal is to make sure around, on average, 50% of the historical marshland area is to be submerged. I mean, the water allocation for marshland is around more or less 5 billion cubic meter per year. We need to make sure the water is allocated for this part. It's very important park. The biodiversity is there, and there are many indigenous people there. So we want to make sure these areas is submerged with water. And with adding to that, mitigation depends on this water. It can absorb many emissions and all of that. So we want to make sure that the marshland is not to be extinct. The last thing that we have is to combat the water intrusion in the southern part of Iraq, where both rivers get connected in the southern part, Basra city. Then the other river, which called Shatt al-Arab, is generated. And people in the in Basra, which use the water in Shatt al-Arab, they are facing the intrusion of salinity water coming from the Gulf. So we need to make sure to combat that intrusion by allocating sufficient water on average to combat that intrusion. And according to our numbers, we need on average around 50 cubic meter per second just to push that intrusion of the salty water. Otherwise, the intake of the drinking water for the Basra city will be affected by the salty water. Now, when we go back to our NDCs, our priorities is to enhance the efficiency of water usage in the agriculture sector. As I mentioned before, around 80%, more or less, depends on the stored water in the system, will be allocated to the irrigation sector. And as I mentioned in the beginning, historically the water was sufficient for all Iraq. So we haven't used at that time the modern technologies, which I mean, I don't want to call it modern technologies. I prefer to use the mechanized technologies with the pipe, because it has been created many years ago, but people still call it modern technologies. So at that time, as I said, our priority was to protect from the flood. We have been facing the drought period as we are facing at the moment. So now we need to change the whole irrigation system from the open channels into closed pipe system. And this required many actions. We need to upgrade the irrigation efficiency in terms of the distribution and in-farm distribution. And we have started working on that, and we have many successful stories in this. And we have also used the modern technologies in terms of lining the canals. We have used the concrete fabric technique. And one of the advantages of this technique is we can stop the water for a couple of days through the rotational, because we use the rotational flow for irrigation, and we can line that canal quickly. We don't need to construct another canal until we get this canal aligned. And also, we started working on the water harvesting dam. And these are all to combat the water desertification and water drought in different areas of the Iraq. And also, we have rehabilitated a couple of dams because some get old, and we wanted to make sure their allocation is sufficient. And also, one of the outcomes from our studies that Iraq doesn't need new dams because the existing dams are sufficient to store water for the coming years. But when we also need to manage the water in terms of the number of allocation. So we don't need to store the water in all the lakes that we have. A couple of lakes will be out of the system just in terms of the drought management. That doesn't mean they get dry. They will be used only for flood protection. But in terms of the drought management, we can store the water in less number of lakes and dams. That will help us to reduce the amount of evapotranspiration losses from our system. And I can tell that in the southern part of Iraq, the evaporation only can reach 3 meters in terms of the depth. So you can imagine how climate change has impacted the Iraq. And I don't want to go in details with that one, but we have been working on that, and we have started working on the road mapping of our NDCs, and so that we can translate the NDC into actions and implement projects. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saddam. That was absolutely amazing. And thank you for highlighting the circularity of water, so to say. That was very, very good. I just wanted to ask the audience if there's any questions. If not, then I have a question for all of you. I guess not. So then I'm going to ask you all, esteemed panelists, one question, which is basically, what would you like the audience to whenever they leave this session, to go out with? What is that key message that you would like to highlight in terms of water and NDCs and NAPs?
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, the one key thing in terms of climate change and how you ensure implementation and effective planning is how do you coordinate the sectors? Because it affects all the sectors, including water. You need to have effective coordination to do this. And also, for you to have effective coordination, you have to put in place the right institutions in place from the national level to the subnational level. And how do you have a clean, smooth flow of information from subnational to the national, and make sure that the institutions there are up and running. In terms of capacity building and flow of resources where possible. And as Kenya, one thing we have realized in terms of effective coordination that is very key is if you make these processes being anchored in law, and for Kenya we have the Climate Change Act that established climate change units in all ministries, departments and agencies, and also at the subnational level, so that there is effective coordination of climate change, planning, budgeting and implementation at all those levels. And so we have a rich experience in terms of anchoring these processes in law. And in terms of water, having a dedicated climate change unit in water ministry that makes sure that issues of water, this climate proving of all the priorities in the water, mainstreaming of climate change in the policy and strategies at that level, and also to make sure that there is effective reporting of what's happening on climate change, which is a requirement under our Climate Change Act, and also under the UNFCCC, we have enhanced transparency that we are supposed to report on what we are doing on climate change. So basically, that's very key, and that's a very important message. And in terms of monitoring and evaluation, realize that as we wait for these systems to be in place, the metrics, methodologies, indicators, you have to take your own step to do, to do something about it. Don't just sit there and wait. Just be proactive and see how we can start building your data systems, your baselines, and track the implementation of adaptation. Resilience building is not a one-off. It's a process, it's a continuum that you have to have so many steps before you reach there. So maybe I can stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. From my side, first of all, you need to be optimistic. Working with a climate phenomena, it's actually complex. So you have to be actually optimistic when it comes to the mobilizing funding, trying to accessing financing for climate adaptation, particularly the challenge for the accessing financing, especially on the GCF or CHEF or World Bank. So dealing with climate adaptation, particularly dealing with the financing, you have to be optimistic, and you have to actually wait, because sometimes it takes time, sometimes the process is complex, sometimes the process actually makes you, tired, so you should be optimistic actually, working for climate adaptation program. The second issue actually is, it is difficult, for example, countries like Sub-Saharan Africa to work on the prioritization for the adaptation program on the water sector. So before NDC and NAP, if you don't have a clear roadmap on the water sector, it's difficult actually, NAP and NDC to give high priority to the water sector. So before NDC and NAP, countries must have a clear multi-year roadmap on the water sector. So that can guide it to the NDC and adaptationist. That's what actually makes it for the easy and implementable on the programs for the adaptation program linked to the water sector. So it should not be actually a face-face. So before NDC, NAP, countries must come up with a multi-year roadmap program on the water sector. The second issue, my colleague has been mentioning about the coordination, which is a very, very critical coordination. Sometimes the line ministers, they don't talk to each other. So it's which actually is a complex. For example, sectorial climate adaptation is a multi-sectorial, institution. So coordination actually is a key in terms for the working for the climate adaptation, is particularly linked to the water sector. So for example, specific water is a cross-sectoral. Many line ministries are actually prioritization for the, some of the directly or indirectly linked to the water sector. So coordination is a very, very critical, particularly, harmonization for the different programs. So these are my message. I will actually stop here.
Again, Ben, thank you so much. And since we are running a little out of time, so I want to make sure my message is briefly, but I want to concentrate my message. My message to the audience is the awareness. We have been facing the climate change, and the climate change impact is real. We can sense the impact. The water coming now is much less than the past. So please don't waste the water. Count the water. Each drop is just like a money. The drops that we are wasting is just like we are wasting money. You may not know that people have been working for the 24/7. They are working all around the day. They don't sleep the night just to make sure the water for you keep flowing. I'm just aware that one day, and I don't want to reach that day, when we open the faucet, we don't see the water. So please, whenever we use the water, don't waste it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben, and also really a huge thanks for spending, to all the panelists, for your precious time, because we know the meeting rooms are waiting. We just didn't want to leave this COP without really making sure that the issue of water is top priority, because the national adaptation plans and NDCs, they're really vehicles for more investment in the sectors. And I think we've heard key messages. I will not attempt to summarize them. Each of our panelists has shared a very key message. And it's very clear there's a huge knowledge base amongst the practitioners of people in the water sector. There are modelers, there are people working on infrastructure round the clock. We've heard it's a long-term investment, but it's also not one day can go by without water. People can survive without food for a few days, but not without water. So I think our attempt is to make sure this conversation continues going, because the NAPs and NDCs are very broad, very multi-sectoral, and we have to zoom in on the issue of partnerships for water, greater modeling in water resources, and also directing more investments into water. And that is one of the reasons that we actually wanted to take away some time from everybody to actually come to this point. And we will, of course, from our own end, try to make sure there are more dialogues around water with all the countries that we are supporting on the NDCs and NAPs, because this Paris Agreement really has to support the water agenda. So with that, a huge thank you. We will not keep you. All of you are really importantly waiting for this thing. We hope there's a strong GGA decision, and we hope there are sectors. So with that, thank you very much. I think we have one last... Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. Excellent. So thank you very much, and thanks to the audience as well. Everybody's found that way on time, and we look forward to continuing to engage with you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.